Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Fireside Chat. This is number 41 with our special guest, Bas Mama. And my name is Brian, and as always, whoa, shit, hold on a second. I'm sorry, I got a problem. Okay. I'm sorry, I was getting my own voice in my ear because I forgot to mute my video. I hate it when that happens. I'm joined by Bunny Blackwell, who's going to hang out with me, and we're going to talk to the YouTuber Bas Mama. So, hi Bas Mama, how are you? And thank you for coming on the show.
Hi, howdy, I'm fine. How are you guys?
I'm doing good. It's a nice day over here, and we're having fun as always in the Badger Cave. So,
Satan's balls over here.
where are you? Whereabouts are you at?
I live in southern Arizona.
Oh my God, yeah, that's
so yeah. It's been up over 115 for
the
longest period we've ever had.
You know, I have a lot of exes that live in Arizona now.
Arizona
sounds
is
like
a
a
very
Johnny Cash
transient
song.
state.
What was that?
It's George Strait. George Strait is all my exes live in Texas.
Yeah, I was thinking it was like Johnny Cash, but that's because I give a little more respect to the Man in Black.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
He gets it one piece at a time, damn it. It's like the best song ever. Sorry.
So, Bas Mama, I want to start by, we're going to get to know you a bit. You are a YouTuber, or at least that's how people like us know you. We at HBR came across your videos as recommended viewing related to the stuff that we make, and then, at least when I looked, and at your content, I was like, oh, well, now I can see why. So, I guess my first question is for people who don't know, what is it that you do on YouTube?
Mostly I talk about Islam, but I've kind of gotten sidetracked a little bit, mostly in just having, I have 4 boys. Actually, I have 3 boys. I'm pregnant with my 4th boy, 6th child, so I have 2 girls and this is my 4th son. And the kind of just the way that they deal with life it's a lot different than how I grew up. I grew up, sorry, I'm letting my dogs out. I grew up in the South. I grew up on a farm. You'll never see a more egalitarian lifestyle than growing up on a farm. Everybody pitches in, everybody works, and that's just the way it is, so you can get by. So when we moved off of the farm and started to kind of interact with the wider world, I wasn't a fan. This was, mid-'80s.
What do you mean, like you weren't a fan? A fan of what? The wider world?
Coming from having a lot of free time, like to play, and we were in the woods all the time and having adventures, and we read classic literature. We read like Greek myths and adventure stories, and we went out and made our own adventures and played Tarzan in the woods and stuff like that. We moved to suburbia, and everybody was so rigidly scheduled. They had piano lessons, ballet lessons, rec league soccer, t-ball, and it was just they were never around to play. There was never any like imaginative, unstructured playtime. And even as a little kid, I didn't like that. I didn't like that I would approach my peers and they couldn't play with me because they didn't really understand this concept of just imagining a thing to be. Yeah. And like you couldn't play pirate ship with them because they were just, well, we don't have a ship, we don't have swords, there's sticks right there, what's the problem? And it was confusing to me. Go ahead.
I grew up rural as well, and I completely understand where you're coming from. There's a certain freedom that comes with that, and it's because once the work is done, it's do something productive, don't die, and I'll see you for supper. So
pretty much. I mean, we had to be threatened with our lives to come in to eat, and nowadays you have to be threatened with your life to get outside. So it's very inverted, and my approach to raising my kids is to provide as much free space as I can, to just let them imagine, or give them kind of a seed of, where are we going to go with this, and just let them develop and do what they want to do and be who they're going to be. Just kind of, I don't know. There's a lot of structured. Everything is so structured for kids these days that there's really no time to just be a kid. And that's very, very detrimental to them, particularly when they become adults, because they have lived their whole life being directed, told what to do at every interval. So there's no self-determination. There's no like, I'm going to do this to fill my time. You're just kind of waiting for instruction. Mm-hmm. And I hate that. From what I have seen, even among my own peers my age, I'm 35, and I've seen it with people my age, where they don't know what to do if they're not being told what to do.
Oh, entertain me. Entertain me.
And my mom always said, go make your own fun. It's not my job to entertain you. Mm-hmm. And I like that. That was always her approach. Like, go find something to do. Make your own fun. And we did. And so I try to encourage my kids to do that. Like, they took karate for a while and they liked it, but they didn't like that it took up so much of their time. But they spent so much time, like, we lived in the car, and it just made everybody miserable. And it's hard when they get out of school. They've been sitting down all day, first of all. They have their 25 minutes of free play recess outside or whatever. There are 9,000 rules on the playground. They can't play tag because they're not supposed to violently touch each other and all of this. They can't hug their friends at school because this is, they have these hands-off policies and stuff. And a couple of years ago, I just had it. I could not take this anymore. So I went shopping for a school that didn't have these stupid policies. The kids were allowed to play tag. They were allowed to play dodgeball. They were allowed to play games and be kids, because it became so frustrating when you have a kindergartner. My son, first day of school, a lot of these kids are just leaving their moms for the first time. It's scary. It's loud. There's big kids everywhere. There's a lot of new rules. It's a new environment. It's confusing. It's frustrating. So he had, this little kid there crying, didn't know where his brother was, because his brother went to the school, but he went across the school. It's not a very big school, but for a 5-year-old, it's a gigantic place. So his brother was somewhere out there in the void, and he was alone and scared. So this was, my oldest is 11 now. This is when he was in kindergarten. He went and he hugged this kid and comforted him. He's like, it's okay. Everybody has to be brave today. Today is a big day for all of us. And he's telling this kid, he's kind of prepping him, because we had talked about it. It's going to be a new environment. It's going to be a new place. You're going to be doing different things. And, everybody's going to kind of be everywhere for a couple of days while we all get ourselves sorted out and settled in. And he understood that, and he was fine with it. This kid spent most of his days at daycare, so it's very structured. Then he was home with his mom. That was very structured because she had limited time, so everything was on a very rigid routine. So he's at school. Everybody's everywhere. He is supposed to carry this packet with him. He doesn't know what's in it. He doesn't know why he has to carry it. It's all very confusing because they don't really tell kids what's going on. They just sort of say, do this, do that, and then the kids are expected to respond, with abject obedience, and that's very difficult for little children to do because they're naturally curious. They want to know why they're doing a thing. And this poor kid was just having the worst time of it, and he started to cry. So my son went and he hugged him, and he's like, it's okay. We're all doing this together. It seems a little scary, but I'll be here with you, and we can be brave together. We can work. We can be a team together. And then I got a note home that day talking about a hands-off policy and how we don't hug our friends at school. And I was infuriated. It's not like he walked up and punched a kid in his head. He hugged him to comfort him, to make him feel safe about this new experience that he was kind of suddenly being thrown into without a lot of preparation or explanation. And I went and talked to the principal, and she was just kind of like, well, that's our policy. That's what we do. And you're like, well, that's stupid, because kids need to be comforted, and they need their peers to say, I'm in this with you, and we can do this together. You know, we're all in this together. We'll work together, and we'll do this as a team.
Yeah, let's
And
crack down on your son for showing empathy, shall we? Like, what?
well, they couldn't do anything. Like, if one of the students spelled, they weren't allowed to help them up. You know, it was stupid stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was this no touching policy, and I thought, this has just gone too far. Right?
Yeah,
To manhandle another kid or hit them is one thing, okay? But to comfort another kid or help them up, are you kidding me?
yeah, it's like risk aversion taken like all the way to the extreme.
Well,
You know?
I thought it was just this school, but it was district wide. This was like a district policy that kids were not permitted to touch each other, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it was just it was so stupid. It didn't make any sense. So I started shopping pretty much right away. I started shopping around, and what I ended up doing was just taking him out of school and homeschooling him, because he was starting to get really, really depressed. He was losing his interest in learning because he wasn't really being permitted to explore those things that he found very interesting. It was like, no, I appreciate that you find that interesting, but we're moving on. Mm-hmm. And I don't like that approach to teaching children, because they never develop their natural gifts and talents if you're always shutting them down so you can move on and stay on schedule. You know, you have to be willing to be flexible or to work with them. So we started shopping around, and I think when he was in the 3rd grade, I found a small school. We have a system here where it's charter schools are partially publicly funded, partially privately funded. And so they have a little more leeway. Like, they don't have to implement Common Core, which is great because it's a horrible system and teaches your kids how to unlearn everything.
Yes.
And
I'm so not a fan. Like, I could do a whole thing on it. Go on.
Well, the math is history is gone, civics is gone, so you don't have any kind of, you're not taught how to be a good citizen, not even of your school or in your family, but in the wider society. You're not taught what it means to be a part of the fabric of your society, whether that's at home, at school, or as an adult, as a functioning, contributing citizen. It's never taught to you that that's an important thing to be. And that's one of the things that really irritated me. So I found a small school where they don't have a stupid no touching policy. It's a charter school. They have they've always had a really good way of taking it, kind of case by case and dealing with the situation as it arises. Because we had moved, and that's how I found the school. But before that, my son and 2 of his friends were watching a kindergartner get bullied by 5th graders on the playground. And they weren't going to have it. So him and 2 of his friends went after these kids and beat them up. And they all got suspended. And I was like, why? I mean, he's defending a smaller child. He's being actively abused by larger kids. And the teachers aren't doing anything because they're so restricted in their discipline that they can't even interfere and discipline these kids. So you have this like zero tolerance bullying policy, and then you also handcuff the teachers and administrators so they can't do anything about it anyway. So you have an ineffectual system where it's really nothing can be done. You just kind of have to let it be. And that's, my son, bless his heart, in 3rd grade going, I'm sorry, I'm going to swear. That's bullshit, Mom. And I'm like, it is. You're right. And I agree.
Call it like he sees it.
Yep.
Well, he was just so mad that these kids are abusing this child, and the teachers are just standing there because they can't do anything about it. And so what do you expect boys to do? Boys are very team-oriented. They're very, they find one thing that they like that this other kid likes, and now they're like bonded for life. They're best friends. That's how boys are. So when they see this kid being harassed and picked on by these other kids, they're not going to put up with it. Boys have a very strong and solidly formed sense of justice and honor at a very young age. And they don't, when they see an injustice occurring, they feel compelled almost in a primitive sense to stand up against it. And for him, he was just doing the right thing. He was defending someone who couldn't defend themselves. And he felt very strongly that that was his duty as an older kid to defend this younger child. And he must. I mean, it wasn't a question of would he get in trouble, what were the consequences he would face. That wasn't, whatever the consequences were, it was worth it to him to do the right thing to protect this kid.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very embarrassed about it. He got suspended for 3 days. He was didn't want to tell me about it. And at the time, his father and I were getting divorced. And so he didn't know how we would individually handle it. And so I got the letter home, and I called his father, and I was like, he got suspended for fighting. Here's the situation as he described it to me. And I called his teacher, and she basically was right in line with his story. Like, she was kind of frustrated by the inability to stop these kids from harassing other kids. I mean, you can kind of tell when there's an injustice happening here, and the rules say you can't stop it, and how frustrated she was by it. And she was honestly very proud of him for standing up and saying, no, I'm not going to tolerate this, and we as a group, me and my 2 friends here, are going to stop you. And they got whipped. Don't get me wrong, they got beat up. But it didn't matter to him because he didn't care if he got his butt kicked. He didn't care if he got suspended. He cared about doing the right thing and being honorable and just. And that's something that I feel like when you handicap teachers from being able to mediate these situations, and you handicap the administration from being able to be adaptable to the situation,
Mm-hmm.
you eliminate justice. And
I am totally down with the fact, just 2 seconds, because I think you will continue, but I want to get this out first.
Mm-hmm.
I am totally down with the fact that you are not throwing the school system under the bus entirely. There are some extremely good teachers out there who do not support Common Core, who want to see a return to a more fair playground and fair rules, more common sense rules. But they are being completely crushed. And you can talk about union influences, and you can talk about political influences, but there are still good teachers out there who are trying, so kudos to you for acknowledging that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had really great teachers when I started going to public school in the 5th grade. And I still didn't like it, but I did have teachers who would compel me to learn and push myself, and they never let go of that sense of justice. That's one of the things I think we confuse fairness and justice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that our children don't learn the difference between, and we try to not see a difference between. So
Well, this gets into equality of opportunity and equality of outcome, right?
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
But it's justice, sacrificing justice for the sake of fairness is a travesty, and we shouldn't encourage it, and we shouldn't do it. And I'm glad that I had kind of abandoned the whole thing and said, well, that's just the way the system is, and I can't really do anything about it. But after my son got in this fight, and he got in just as much trouble as the kids who were harassing this kindergartner, and the kindergartner got suspended. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, this little kid.
That's actually really common, where, if something happens, everyone is punished.
Yeah, and that's in the sake of fairness.
For the sake of fairness, yeah.
But it is an injustice to this child and to the kids who are defending him.
It's really because of laziness. Like, they don't really want to understand the situation, so instead they just find it easier to punish everyone. Because, typically when these things happen, you have kids that are going to cry victim that are actually the bullies, and you're going to have kids that are actually victims that are trying to, have their problems solved. And the administration doesn't care enough. And again, not all, and I agree with Bunny, because I had an award-winning teacher in 6th grade and 8th grade, and he was a great man. He did lots of great stuff. It was a male teacher, not that matters, but just so you guys know, we actually had more male teachers when I was going to grammar school in Chicago than we do now.
See, I love my guy teachers, though.
Huh?
I loved my male teachers.
Yeah, I like my male teachers, too.
Mr. Taylor, my biology teacher, was the best guy ever.
They were. But so yeah, they were great teachers, and this stuff really is out of their hands.
Yeah.
Especially that no touching thing, which is something that not only applies to the children but also to the instructors, and that has to do with, of course, stranger danger and all this other shit that
Well,
has
I
been
think it's.
going
I'm
on.
going to step outside. It's about them just trying to avoid lawsuits as much as
Yeah,
possible because you do
essentially.
have
Yes.
shitty, lazy, litigious parents who don't do anything for their kids, aren't involved with their kids, and then they just throw fits and sue like crazy. And
Yep.
it's frustrating because it doesn't do anything to help your child become educated, which I would think would be your goal as a
Thank you.
parent,
When
would
you
be
Yeah.
to
apply
want your
everything,
child to have a good
yeah.
education.
When you apply everything with this brush, what you're actually doing is you're crushing the ability of discernment, of being able to decide what is right, what is wrong, what is fair, what is not. If you just say, no, you're involved, you're fucked. And people instinctively know, well, that's not fair. And then I think it's aging children in the wrong way. We're
Yes.
not.
Well,
Yeah.
that was something else I wanted to bring up. This no touching thing, which is actually it's pretty shocking. Imagine, first off, human beings are social creatures.
Mhm.
Touching is probably the first way that it is the first way in which we communicate with each other from the moment we are
Oxytocin, yo.
born, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So touching each other is the first way in which we manage to sort of send messages, and you take someone who this is part of our biology, and then when they get into school you tell them that one thing, that primal thing that need to for physical contact, you are no longer allowed to do. And it is a you instill in the child this idea that it was never okay and that there's something wrong about it. It's almost like this I don't know, like you're somehow stained or dirty for engaging in it, because there's
Yeah,
this
it's now an
punishment.
illicit activity that you should,
Yeah,
that's bad and you shouldn't have ever been doing it.
right. And there's all these weird, like, social limitations that you have, and then that child grows up and starts to socialize, and they actually get into a point where they're supposed to talk to people and maybe meet someone, whatever, and it's going to stunt their ability to socially interact. It's going to affect that
Well, yeah,
because
because for 20, 25 years they've been told that nonverbal contact is off limits.
exactly.
So
And
how are
so,
you going to develop any kind of a
yeah,
Mhm.
relationship with somebody?
exactly.
And
It's all
It's
very Victorian.
I could see how. Oh, it's very Victorian. I could see how, imagining a 10-year, I'm sorry, a 14 or 15-year-old boy that's going through puberty and realizes that, he notices girls and he develops a crush, and he has no idea how to engage with that person. And part of it has to do with the fact that, he's not been allowed to touch other people through his, schooling. He's also been told that because he is a boy, something is wrong with him. He engages in toxic behavior. He's overly competitive. He's overly physical in his activities. And if those kids develop incredible amounts of anxiety around talking to people, around trying to engage a girl that they have an interest in conversation, we blame them. We say they're awkward. Something's wrong with him. He must be a nerd. He must have, a disease, like, some kind of social disorder. Let's give him pills, or whatever. This is really messed up, and I think we got a little bit far off of the question. But
No, but I think
all
you bring
good.
up an important point though, because we
yeah,
try with one of the things I studied psychology and I got out of it because I couldn't tolerate it. I wanted to do marriage and family therapy. My parents are divorced. My mom's a psychologist. I have two sisters who are psychologists. Kind of a family thing. The reason I got out of it is because when you do your clinics and you're sitting in on people's marriage counseling, about 85% of the time, what you had was a wife pissed off, raging about something, wanting her therapist to confirm all of her suspicions and all. I mean, some of it was just ridiculous. But she was mad about something, and the guy's just there. He doesn't really know what he's done, but he wants to do whatever is necessary to fix it, and she's already divorced. That was the thing that really pissed me off, is you had, when men go into counseling, that's, there's a problem. Okay, let's find a solution. Let's fix the problem. The woman she's already made up her mind. Before she walks in the door, she's made up her mind whether she will stay or go. And what she's looking for primarily is for that counselor to say, go ahead and go. You don't need to feel guilty about this. And that was one of the biggest things that pissed me off, because when my parents got divorced, they really needed to. My father was a child molester. He was, mentally very, very, very messed up. That split needed to occur. It needed to occur. It wasn't, she didn't take any joy in it. She wasn't happy about it. She wasn't running all over the place partying and things like that. She really, it was hard for her to make that decision. And I understood that. Even being 10 years old, I understood that. When this is one of the things that I wanted to fix. I wanted to get involved so I could fix it. We went to the Women and Children's Resource Center, and my brother was about 15, and he had been molested too. My father was indiscriminate about it. And we had just tons of books, and there was there's a course, like cycle course, that you go through to end up, healed or whatever. And there's really nothing for boys. He was basically told to kind of suck it up and walk it off.
Yeah.
And that really pissed me off, because he was, in puberty, didn't really understand how he related as a male to other males, didn't understand how he should relate to females as a male. He was very, I'm going to get a lot of hate for it, but I'm going to tell you, I think that sexual abuse for boys is more psychologically damaging than it is for girls. And I think the reason it is not because the action itself is more psychologically damaging, but the absolute lack of resources and willingness to help them afterwards.
The response is significantly, it's
Girls
like, it's
coddled.
muted.
Are you sure that's what happened? Are you sure? Are you sure it went that way?
I don't know. She is pretty hot.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. You're not going to get hate from me on this.
You get kind of blown off and really kind of ignored. Like, you should just suck it up and walk it off, and that's part of being a man, is just getting over it. And you can't approach it that way. And they were working out of an old PTSD shell shock manual from Vietnam, trying to deal with him, because that's what they had. It wasn't that they didn't want to help, it's that they couldn't. So my mom was a second wave feminist, and God bless her, she tried to hold on through this third wave stuff, and she's just like, it's not working for me. You guys are crazy. So she just was like, yeah, this is just a bunch of whining bitches at this point.
Bridge too far. Yeah.
Well, for her, it was very much about just having the opportunity. Title IX was a big deal when she was a teenager, that being able to play on, a recognized school team that was supported by the school was a big deal. It wasn't that there wasn't athletics for girls, it was that you didn't have the kind of funding and support from the school that you would have had for boys. And even though, we still have that kind of funding and support, you don't have as much attraction for girls' sports, because, quite frankly, it takes a special kind of girl to be interested in competitive athletics. And you're going to find her dad is more supportive maybe than her mom would be. Not me, because I'm competitive and I have always been kind of more like a boy than a girl anyway in my processes. But it's the opportunity, and that's what mattered for them. So for her to see this huge gaping hole in opportunity for her son to heal really angered her, and she went about pursuing people to help him and to try to get him some kind of counseling, but the ability to respond was so impotent that she really couldn't get him much more than very, very, very basic trauma counseling. And that always frustrated her, and it still frustrates her that the response has basically remained the same for the past 25 years is just get over it. You know, girls, we have tons of books and we have all of this information and we spend years and years in counseling and we're all headed toward this like hugs and snuggles and kisses and, you know, adapting ourselves to intimacy and all this crap that they give you. What do boys have? Get over it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's not keep telling boys just get over it.
No.
Why? They need some kind of guidance, you know?
Full disclosure time, because it's relevant. I was in foster care for child victims of sexual abuse, and it was a co-ed house that there was mostly girls, but there were a few boys. And the difference in like the therapy styles, what girls responded to versus what the boys responded to was so obvious. The boys would literally rather have had a root canal than sit in a group and cry and share their feelings. And
therapy.
and I, even at the time, I worried, you know, because what I found, in my experience, what really more helped the guys was just going out and doing things and sorting out their heads on their own time. But forcing them to speak about it, I felt bad for them. I don't think it did much good. And in speaking with them, they're like, yeah, I can't wait to leave. I'm like, oh, okay.
I think,
but yeah,
in very, very general terms, I think that males respond better to cognitive behavioral therapy as opposed to psychoanalysis or talk therapy. I think girls tend to work through things by vocalizing, by just giving a voice to things, and that's why they tend to rehash things so often as they work through these little bits. But I don't think that, I mean, Brian, you'd have to tell me, but I don't think it's difficult for them to try to like change the way that they deal with something, to try to force it through this. It's like square peg in a round hole. And they're just trying to jam themselves through this particular slot to get to the next step, and it's very ineffectual.
That was my observation as well. I'm like, I don't think this is helping. But what did I know at the time, right? I was just a kid. But now,
when you're a kid, you don't have your views aren't tainted by quote unquote academia. You have a very that's kind of, you know, out of the mouths of babes, because they don't have that filter and they don't have the colored lens that you develop. They will just tell you like it is. Like, you know, if you're fat, kid's gonna tell you you're fat.
Yeah.
Like, they don't care.
They're brutally honest, you know.
Yeah,
they don't realize it's not really brutal. I mean, I guess that phrase brutally honest sometimes doesn't sit well with me, because it implies a person who's using the honesty is attempting to be hurtful. A lot of times the fact that you're being honest means that you're just saying what is. And if the other person gets upset, that's their problem, to be honest.
Well, offense is never given.
It's only taken, yeah. Exactly.
Taken. Jinx, you owe me a bag of chips.
It's kids are very frank and straightforward, and they are not going to disguise their intent or what is behind their words.
Yeah.
If they say something that's a little bit like off kilter, and you inquire, they will be very honest, and they will tell you why they think that and how they came to that conclusion without any kind of mucking about or trying to rationalize it, because they're very secure in their opinion, so they don't feel the need to repeatedly rationalize it or try to make it make sense to you. So they'll just tell you, which is it's a good thing.
And they unlearn that, essentially.
They do.
As time goes on, they start to realize that, or they're conditioned to believe that being honest is not always good. Being nice is more important. Being considerate, and so on. And I think there's a place for that, and it's good for them to know that stuff. But I think it's being tactful and stuff. But I think that in many ways, like the way that things are now, it's gone way, way too far. Being nice it's more important than acknowledging reality. And it's to our own, to our own folly that has become the case. So.
Well, that's one of the things that I was listening to the show from yesterday. I guess I'd put the little ones to bed, got right in there, and started taking notes, and then, of course, put them somewhere because I have pregnancy brain, and that's what I do now.
Yeah, by the way, congratulations. I forgot to tell you earlier.
Oh, thank you. I just forget stuff. I've forgotten my own name. It's just part and parcel. You drop 10 to 20 IQ points, which is not an excuse for forgetting your own name, but you do, especially with the sleep deprivation. It's worse. But I started to take some notes because I had listened. I always listen when Tom is on the show because I am a single mom and I'm engaged now, but it's important for me. Thank you. It's important for me to have a male perspective on parenting, especially from somebody who has already done it. Their kids are adults. I want to hear what they have to say. I want to know their experience. And one of the things that he brought up that I thought I really noticed a drop off when I was a kid. When my grandfather died, my aunt was about 5 years old. And she said that the real difference between her mother as a single parent and single moms today is that back then a point was made to find good, strong, loving male role models and get them into the children's life as quickly as possible. Because you couldn't do much, her dad died. She can't do much about that. But what she can do is say, if you need a male presence, here's, I think it was their neighbor, her best friend's dad. They were always very close as families. He was very close with my grandfather, and she knew him, and he was there with her. And my grandmother's attitude also of, even though my grandfather wasn't there, it was sort of like, if she wasn't the one to make the choice or to make the ultimate decision on something, it would have been deferred to him. If she was unable to really determine something or come down on one side or the other in any given situation, she would, but it was always, what would Luther have done, And she got the distinct impression that it wasn't about, I don't need no man. that idea wasn't there. And even with my own mother, that idea wasn't there. My parents split up, but there were men in my life who were strong role models. And when she married my stepdad, who I just call my dad, he's just my dad, it wasn't such a tough transition for me because she was very, very careful to make sure that there were good men in our life. And they were around and they were, helping. Or like we had a neighbor, his dad, he was like my best friend neighbor, his dad taught me how to change brake pads on a car when I was 8, because my parents had already split up and were, you had to wait, I think, at the time 2 years. You had to be separated for 2 years if you had children in common before you could file for divorce. So they were separated, and it was something that's how he related, was teaching. And I think that men are by nature teachers. They want to extend knowledge. It's just something that I notice that's very inherent in men generally. They want to show you something. They don't want to tell you about it. That's something that's really different between men and women. Women want to talk to you about it. Men want to show it to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things with my fiance I noticed too, is he loves cars. So when he wants to tell me something about a car, it always ends up, well, never mind, I'll just show you. Because he's more excited. I don't know. This
is the coolest thing ever, and you need to see it because it's the coolest thing ever, and I am including you in my interests, and that is a sign of my love and affection for you.
Exactly, yeah. But I get that. And I think if I hadn't grown up with, good men in my life who wanted to teach and wanted to extend their wisdom to me, I really don't think that I don't think I would understand that that's him loving me. if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we have a huge disconnect between males and females, especially in Western society, where we try to take the boy out of boys.
Well, turn them into girls, really.
It's like my mom told me when I had my second son, he was about 2 years old. It was loud. Everywhere was loud. And she said, I got news for you, honey. Boys are solidified noise. You better get used to it. And that was kind of a slap in the face because I didn't realize I tend to be a pretty quiet person. But for her to just lay it out flat like that, get over it. That's them being boys. Don't you dare stifle that. And I love her for that. I mean, we bicker over politics and things like that. But she was very clear. Don't you dare take away from them their ability to be boys.
But this idea has been perverted into, well, boys will be boys, so what does that mean?
I was just going to get at
that. I figured you would.
But that's toxic masculinity.
No, that's such a bullshit. That's such made-up bullshit.
Boys
honestly,
will be boys. That leads to rape all the time.
You know what boys will be boys leads to? Fighting behind a bar. That's what that leads to.
Yeah, I don't think boys will be boys actually leads to rape. I don't know.
No, it doesn't. It's just it's fear-mongering.
It leads to them being competitive against each other or fighting each other.
Yeah.
I was just going to say boys will be boys leads to having 911 speed dialed on your phone because they're going to climb a tree and fall out of it.
Pretty much.
It's not rape. It's not rape. That's a leap right there.
This whole rape culture lie is, I'm so over it. I'm just so over it. Because first of all, I had made a video, and I stand by everything I said in there, that SJWs terrorize rape victims for fun and profit. Why would you do that to somebody? Why would you tell somebody this thing that happened to you, that is, let's face it, less than 1% of the population perpetrates this? Why would you then take that trauma and say it's everywhere? That is terrorizing people for no damn reason with lies that terrify them, that keep them utterly traumatized for years. Don't do that to people. Give them the real numbers, the real facts, the real stats, so they can regain normalcy and function. And I mean, the goal, I'm sure you understand, the goal after having been traumatized and messed up in that way as a child, your goal is to be normal. And that's a huge goal. It's a huge thing to reach, just being okay with yourself and not being afraid all the time. Because you realize, I like
there's a danger
to telling a war vet that Charlie's everywhere.
Yes.
Why would you do that to someone? It's just evil. It's just evil.
It is.
That's what it is.
Schrodinger's Charlie.
Schrodinger's. You have to do Schrodinger and everything, don't you?
I do.
Because he's a dog and he doesn't like cats. That's what it's all about.
It's amazing. It's amazing. The tongue forgives all. I had a thought and the tongue distracted me. I went off on a bad tangent. Okay. No.
Do you have issues to discuss, Bunny?
I don't blame you. I don't blame you, Bunny.
Oh my God,
my tongue can be very distracting.
It is, and I'm so distractible. It's not even funny. What I was going to say is, there's this thing in processing abuse where you do have to acknowledge it, you have to go through it, you have to process it. But there comes a point where you can no longer live in it, because living in it and identifying as that and having that be your entire identity, you will not move on. And moving on does not mean you let go of it. It doesn't mean you excuse it. It means you decide, okay, I've grieved. I've done the work I need to do. It sucked. I'm not going to say it didn't suck. What am I doing now? And if you live in the identity, if you live in the identity of a victim, that is all you will see. To a carpenter, everything is a nail. And I think that's a horrible way to live.
It is, because you're intentionally traumatizing yourself or others in this
over
case.
And over.
And by telling women, especially women who have been raped, that you have a 1 in 4, 1 in 3, 1 in 5 chance. Honestly, that's a fucking ridiculous number. I mean, take like 2 seconds and think about it. 1 in 5.
Oh yeah.
That's
No,
like
I know.
30% of everybody you know.
Yeah, that would be basically with stats like that. If I walked from my house to the grocery store to pick up some produce, I would have walked past rapes in progress on the way to the store. Like at least like 10 or 12.
Especially if you live in a high population area.
Yeah, I live in Chicago. I mean, you know,
at least 4 on your way to Safeway. Are you kidding?
Exactly. I would have walked past it on the way. When I was in college, there would be, you know, just blood in the halls.
Everywhere.
You know,
well, and that's the thing is, women respond to emotional arguments much more so than men do. Mm-hmm. Women are very prone to sophistry, which is one of the things that I never really liked about chicks. I have very few female friends because I don't like the emotional argument side of things. I understand that it has a place, but when you're trying to present stats and statistics, there's no place for that. These are numbers. Numbers don't have feelings. They don't care about your feelings. They're just numbers. They're inanimate. They have no pretense or motivation. So they're just what they are. So it was honestly, in healing and trying to move on with my life, it was very comforting to me to go from, because I'm bisexual, so I was in the LGB, there was no T then, group in college, and they and especially, like, I hate to bash lesbians, it was them. That's who it was. They were just, you want to talk about toxic? That is toxic. It was constantly like, men are evil, they're coming for you, they just want to enslave you through marriage, and I mean, just this constant bullshit rhetoric, and I knew too many guys to go in for this.
A couple things.
Like,
a couple things I want to throw in there. No, it's okay. Usually, when it comes to lesbians that make those arguments, they are what Allison likes to call political lesbians. Like, they make a choice, you know, like to be lesbian, like kind of like a transgender, which is a term that Theron Meyer and Blair White use when they talk about people who, you know, don't feel like they're in their right body, but they haven't actually gone through all the process. You know, it's more of a political statement. Political lesbians are the ones that usually do that. And also, in addition, emotional arguments do work on men that have not, how do I put this? They have been essentially raised to accept those kinds of arguments as fact, especially if not specifically if it comes from women. Because when I would get into debates with my ethics professor about things related to feminist issues, the men were actually more often more of an obstacle. They were more defiant or more argumentative against me, but even though they didn't have any arguments, they were just being emotional, than the women were. And while women were going along with the feminist narrative a lot of the time, the ones that did not agree would not openly disagree, but after class was over, they would come up to me and they'd be like, "Oh, I'm so glad you said that about rape culture," or whatever.
Oh, see, I'm all balled out about it. I don't even care what you think of me. I've been through too much shit in my life to have your opinion mean jack to me. Like,
well, I think, I mean, without getting like too involved with that, I think the reason why those girls didn't do that in class was because they didn't want to lose their social currency.
Yeah, it's female.
They didn't. Yeah, so they were like, well, I don't want to speak out because, you know, and they would actually admire the fact that I did, and then there were some men that either didn't say anything, they didn't say anything either, because they were also afraid of losing social currency, because a lot of times that especially in these sort of classroom environments, that seems to be the domain of women when you are a man that's interested in women. You know, when you're a boy and you're not interested in girls yet.
What do you mean interested? As in sexually interested?
Like,
or
like as in
about?
No, interested in women as in like, oh, maybe I want to, you know, I want to date one day, or, you know, there's a girl in this class that I like, or even if they don't really have like an interest in any of the women that are in that specific space, there is a consideration for their feelings because maybe sometime down the line that woman might know a woman who knows a woman that you want to get involved with. But if you fuck it up in that class and say, yeah, I think that, men should also have paternal rights, and have like a say in, abortion, for example. If that's like your
Total
opinion,
beta
then
bullshit.
yeah, then like the girls,
Never
there's a
respect a
fear.
man who did that. Like, ugh, it's automatically you are not dateable.
Yeah,
Like,
well, that's just
no.
it, though. It comes from, but the thing is, though, this, what you were saying, this beta bullshit, where does it come from? And I think that it has to do with a
Single
lot of
mothers.
men that are raised by single mothers who, specifically, because I know that you said you're a single mother, and I know that there are single mothers that do this, that do a better job of this, but there are a good number of single mothers that don't understand male nature, they don't understand masculinity, they don't understand boys at all, and or they work really hard to make sure that there are no fathers in that boy's life. So
Oh,
he
and then they
goes
do
through
this
life.
shit where they're like, you're just like your father.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's such a
Oh,
terrible thing. Well, you know what, honey? You fucked him,
Yeah.
so there must have been something good about him.
Yeah.
Like, I
And
hate that. Oh, God, that gets under my skin.
yeah,
I've been up in mom's faces for that. I will.
and
Like,
then
hey, you liked him enough to have a kid with him, so it couldn't have been that bad.
and
Because
those
you're
boys.
telling that boy that he's bad by his very nature, by the fact
Sure.
that he exists, that he's a bad thing. Why would you do that to your own child?
Yep.
That's
And
horrible.
those boys grow up. Think about this too. They grow up with a hole of affection and understanding that they never could get, either because the persons that were closest to them just didn't understand them, or didn't have an interest in them, or maybe they resent them. Because I knew a girl, and I know this is common. I knew a girl who became a single mother who grew to resent her son because the father of her child committed suicide before he was born, and the reason why was because he was mentally ill, like he was suicidal, and she thought if she had his baby, he would find a reason to live, and it actually made it worse because
no.
the pressure to essentially become a father to that child, he couldn't handle. And then she took an interest in somebody else and started dating another guy while she was still because she was basically like, well, I can't take this guy's problems anymore, so I'm going to start dating someone else. And then she told him, I'm seeing somebody else now, and I'm still carrying your baby. And so that guy killed himself. And then she has the child, and she resents the child. It's like, I made a mistake. Why did I keep this baby? I can't stand looking at him. He reminds me of all of the stupid mistakes that I made,
Well, that's
And,
her problem, and she needs to deal with that.
Absolutely.
But then that goes back to the personal responsibility aspect of all of this. Like, I mean, yeah, like I said, I'm a single mom. We're divorced. My kids see their dad every weekend when they're in school, and then we have it's a default 50-50 state, so thank God we didn't have to deal with any of that crap. And one of the things I don't like about this state is they enforce child support. So even if you don't want it, they'll take a minimum amount out of his paycheck one way or the other.
It's the same where I live. Yeah, it's the same where I live.
I hate that. I tried to close the bank account. I tried to request not to have it. I did all this crap, and you can't. They'll arrest you for not receiving it.
Contempt of court, baby.
Christ, like, you can't. I mean, but I don't need it. And he does. He's married and trying to, restart his life with a new wife. And I'm like, he clearly needs it more than I do. They don't care. And that's frustrating, very frustrating to me, because it makes you out like you're automatically the bad guy, like you've got a grudge, even though you don't, and you're shackled by this just as much as he is. But thankfully, you can put a cap on alimony, but you can't. There's a minimum, like you have to do 1 month for every year of the marriage, and that's the minimum that you can do. So we did that, and so because I felt like it was really unfair to him to, I want half your money. Why? I'm capable. Well, actually, right now I'm on disability because I have trigeminal neuralgia, which is also called the suicide disease. And if you have it, you would understand why. It's horribly painful. It's like being tasered in the face randomly throughout the day. It's really awful. But but before that, I was working, in a medical office. I didn't really need it. I was fine. I was functional, and even now I don't really need it, but they make you take it. And to me, I was raised that you have to, you have to be prepared to provide for yourself and any children you have on your own, no matter what, because you can be married and you can be as happily married as you want to, but that's not going to stop, a car accident or a work accident or something, and it may require you to, pull it together and support your family even if you stayed at home. So it is a plan B type thing where you always kind of had a backup. And so there was never an expectation of full reliance, because that wasn't really being part of the team, the married team. So I never really, I stayed at home with the kids, but it wasn't like I was inept or unprepared. It took a little while to restart and get things settled and established, but I don't know, I was raised like disability is charity and welfare is like the last thing you want to do, and you're just a drain on the system. And so we didn't have a welfare culture. That was, even now where my mom lives, where I grew up, it's still shameful to be on welfare. It's not something you want. It's not something you want to be associated with. It's not.
Yeah.
If there's some reason that you need it, that's a different thing. But sorry, the cicadas are out. We didn't make it. It wasn't something that, it wasn't a fallback where you were like, oh, I guess I'll just go get on welfare. Like, for a time, it would be okay. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. You continue your thought. I just don't want to lose mine, but go ahead and then I'll jump in.
Oh, no, I was done.
I was just going to say, given your understanding of the inequities with respect to the law and marriage and things like that, did that give you pause before deciding to get married?
At the time, I didn't really know. This is a covenant state. So fault plays a part in it if you want it to, kind of thing. We just said irreconcilable differences and went our separate ways. But we didn't. I'm glad that it's an automatic 50-50 state, because that it's maybe not just, but it's fair. And the kids are little. Like my son just turned 11. Pretty soon he may prefer to live with his dad as he's coming into manhood, and I'm not opposed to him doing that, because if that's going to facilitate his success as an adult, I don't really see a reason why I should disrupt that. Sorry, or deprive him of that. I have another daughter. I got married the day after I turned 18 in Virginia, and it lasted about a year, long enough to have a baby. But she's 15, and she's been feeling the need to be with her mom, and so she's moved out here with me to be with her mom in preparation for becoming an adult woman. So I expect that probably my sons will have the same desire when they are about the same age to want to live with their dad, so that they can observe, an adult male and learn from him. And I don't have a problem with that. He's a good father. We had, tumultuous divorce, tumultuous marriage, but he's always been a really good dad. He's always watched out for them. He's always been there for them. He's always provided the best that he could for them. And I don't have any kind of, I think it's when it comes to single moms, I think it really depends on their mental health, where they are with relationships, where they are with their own self-confidence, where they are. I notice that there's a tendency with divorced moms or single moms, that were in maybe a long-term relationship or whatever, where they tend to use the children as weaponry against the man, because they know that he loves them very, very deeply. So they wield them like nuclear weaponry against him.
And because they can, because women can.
Well, that is abusive and manipulative and cruel to not just him, but to the children too.
Agreed. The reason I'm asking, I am extremely hesitant to get married because I trust myself that I would never maliciously, you know, if things went to shit, which is entirely possible because I'm very unlikable and difficult to live with. But hey, no, it's true. I'm just being honest. I have lab experiments on the kitchen table. It's awful. But anyway, but if it did go to shit, even though I would never, I know in myself I would never push it because I hold myself to a very strict standard. I would hate the thought of it being taken out of my control to where he gets hosed and there's nothing I can do about it. And so I'm very personally leery of getting married because I think right now it's a raw deal. And if I love someone, I don't want them to get a raw deal. If they want to marry me in an emotional sense, or you know, give me a red ribbon and a broom or a cupcake or some shit, that's great. But in terms of the state involvement, I am extremely hesitant, which is why I wanted to know what you thought about it.
Well, I'm engaged now, and that is kind of a little bit of a coarse spot for us because he wants state marriage and I don't. Because I don't.
Look, can I ask?
Sorry,
can I ask? No, it's okay. Can I ask why he wants a state marriage? Do you know?
For him, I think that it makes it like official for him. You know, like it's official.
Okay.
And for me, it's not so much. And when we were talking about it, I told him, you know, if we, God forbid, ever got divorced, you would get so screwed by it that it's not even funny. And he's like, well, you know, you split with your ex and you didn't take half of his retirement or anything like that. And I'm like, but even if I don't pursue something, the county that you divorced in may do it anyway, and you don't have control over that.
Exactly, and that is my concern. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, it doesn't just vary by the state, it varies by the county, even, you know, if by the city. It's, you know, you really have to know your local laws and legislation because even if you are just separated, there are laws that apply to that as well. And you have to be aware of this. And to be honest, it's a lot of the state involved in a very personal aspect of my life, and I don't want them involved. And I told him, you know, you want to be committed and have a wedding and all that, that's fine with me. But after seeing the way that we tried to be just and fair with each other, and he still got screwed, it frustrated me because it's geared, the system is geared to make the female malicious, even if she's not.
I was just going to say, even if you don't want to be.
Yeah, you're sort of locked into this position where you have to screw this guy over. And the trouble is now that even if you're cohabitating, these laws will still apply. Thankfully, in Arizona, there is no common law.
Have you ever seen the documentary Divorce Court?
No. Should I?
It's on Netflix, and it's all about the divorce industry, essentially.
Yeah, it really is an industry.
Yeah, it is an industry. It's a money-making machine. It's a really good documentary. I recommend it. So you should definitely check it out. It's called Divorce Court.
Thank you. I will.
As a corporation. So yeah, definitely look at it. And there has been a lot of discussion in political circles and the YouTubes and stuff. You know, more of like not the mainstream area, around this whole conversation regarding marriage and whether or not it should be a state-sanctioned, union. And a lot of people they are not interested in doing it that way, and that seems to be a growing sentiment. So we hopefully, anyway, we may see some change with regards to the way that people tie the knot, so that it's. I mean, first off, there's like political reasons why it existed before, why it was part of the state. It was obviously so,
Well, it became state sanctioned so that it could be well taxed.
Yes.
That's a lot of people. Like, I argue with people over this all the time. My great grandmother was anti-suffragette. Very, very anti-suffragette. She owned her own business. She had her own land. She summered in New York and the Catskills and wintered in Palm Beach. She wasn't an idiot. She built this from nothing as a Scottish immigrant, along with her husband, who was from the Netherlands. They built this, they built these hotels, and they made this business. She didn't want to do it because she knew there was a scam in there somewhere. And it wasn't that she didn't, think that women were fit for military service. She, in World War I, women were, military nurses and things. They were enlisted. They were there. But for her, she read up on it and, oh, okay, they want to tax your income. Before that, married women's income would not be taxed. If you were married or you lived with your parents, your income wasn't taxable because it was considered like child labor type thing. It was kind of falling under that like support of the family thing. So you weren't going to be taxed. If you got the vote, you'd suddenly be taxed. And that's what really caught her, and that's why she was against it, was because she was like, oh, what they're really looking for is to be able to tax everybody, whether they vote or not. They don't care if you're ever going to vote. Give a damn.
You always got to follow
of
the money.
Yeah. Well, she said that Rockefeller was for it, and when rich men are for it, poor people should ask themselves why.
Yeah.
And she was always, well, being Scottish, she was always very like, if the nobility, as it were very much in favor of it, then the peasants should always revolt. It was kind of like, just as a matter of your own self-interest, get in there and figure out why. And that's why she was against it. It was because she saw it as a taxing scam. And that's kind of what marriage was too, because you could tax people more if they were married, and so they did. And like and the same thing is being repeated right now. I don't know if you guys noticed this. We have, yes, we're going to legally, federally recognize gay marriage. Mm-hmm. And now there's a huge tax on married couples.
Yep.
Do you think that happened by accident?
No, not at all. I mean, but the thing is, with the gay marriage thing, it was very difficult to make that argument that you're making right now. To be honest, because, the idea that...
I know a lot of smart fags. They kind of caught on to that.
Oh,
they were like,
yeah.
Why all of a sudden the flip?
Mm-hmm.
People, career politicians who had always been against it were all of a sudden okay with it. Something's dirty.
Oh, yeah.
And so they immediately start looking into it. No, okay, that's it. They're gunning for this higher tax on married couples now, and they see them as cash cows.
And homosexual male couples, they typically bring home a lot of money. Yeah. Yes, they have a lot of money.
And that's what they're banking on.
Yep.
The government is extremely good at diversifying income. We'll say that. Nobody is a better investor than the federal government. As much as other countries own a large portion of our debt, we the people own most of it.
Especially with other people's money, but yes.
Well, yeah. They're very good at taking your money.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that was my thing, was like, how come all of a sudden even, ardent conservatives are like, oh, it's okay, let's go for it. Something's up. What's happening? Because I guess as you grow up, you become jaded and cynical, and you realize that anytime the government is pushing something, it's probably not in your best interest.
But they'll tell you it is.
Well, they always tell you it is. I mean, they used to tell you that,
well, sort of the mob.
Good for you, and Coca-Cola with the cocaine in it was so good for you. It gave you pep.
Yeah.
Over-the-counter morphine. Woo!
I want to go back to the notes you took about yesterday's show. First off, can you give me your impressions? What did you think about the show? And then you say you have a son. Do you have any other? How many kids do you have? You have three sons. Okay.
I'm pregnant with my sixth child right now.
Okay. So how many are we looking at? How old and how many? All your children.
My oldest daughter is 15. My oldest son is 11. And I have an 8-year-old daughter, a 5-year-old son, a 3-year-old son, and I'm pregnant with this baby. So he's 6 months, so yes.
So 6?
6 months, this baby.
No, I mean 6
Oh.
kids, 5 kids?
Yes, 6 kids.
6 kids. Well, 5 and 1 on the way, right?
I was just going to say
Yeah.
5 3/4.
5 and, yeah, 5
Well,
and 3/4.
See, I don't view it like that because after you have a couple of kids, you realize something. They are who they are in utero. When you hit about 4 months pregnant, they start playing with you, interacting with you, wanting to see, to hear what's going on. They're reactive to light, to sound, to stimuli. They are sentient. They're their own person. That's one of the things that I hate, that people try to pretend like babies aren't people because they're not on the outside doing stuff.
I was just going to say,
They
no,
are.
I hear the Jimmy's being wrestled. Do you hear that? It's like a disturbance in the force. How could you
suck
say
it,
that?
bitches. That's what I say. But after 6 kids, their personality becomes apparent to you in utero while you're pregnant with them. This baby he doesn't get frustrated easily, but when he does, he's vocal about it. He gets hiccups, and they'll go away, and then they'll come back, and then he gets mad. And babies move in a certain way when they're angry, and I can feel him moving in that way of being frustrated. And something else I think Tom kind of touched on it, but mothers and babies exchange stem cells during pregnancy, and we exchange hormones. So you can actually feel your child's emotional state in utero. So you can tell when they're frustrated, and you can tell when they're curious, and your body physically responds to them being stimulated and curious. This baby, I don't want to say his name because he's named after family, and it's a surprise. I wanted to call him that, but he knows his name, I can tell you that. But if you get a flashlight, even as early as 3.5, 4 months, you get a flashlight and put it on one side, and the baby will move to the flashlight. They'll go and find the light. You talk to them, and they'll move from one side to the other, trying to locate that noise, trying to find that sound. And the way I describe it to my kids is like, you've been walking around your whole life, free and moving with the gravity that you know, and then you're born, and all of a sudden you're trying to exist inside the gravitron. Everything is very heavy and confusing and loud and bright. I don't know if you guys have ever been on that ride. It's like flashing lights, loud music, and you're like, everything is 1,000 pounds. Your head weighs a ton, your arms weigh a ton. And that's what it's like coming from this little bubble of happiness and warmth that you've been comfortable in out into the world now, where it's like, oh crap, I have to figure out how my body works again. And so they're actually very adept at movement, and their motor skills are I wouldn't say fine-tuned motor skills, but they're they know their bodies when they're in this environment. So they're adapting to being born is trying to, like I said, it's like trying to now live in the gravitron. It's very loud. It's very, very bright, and your body is just so heavy you can hardly move it around. Have you ever tried to like lift your arm or reach across yourself in the gravitron, and your hand just goes bam and hits you in the face?
Yeah, I remember that ride. That was my favorite one.
Mine too.
I've only ever been at once, and only ever will. I really like roller coasters, but that spinny fucking thing, I'm like, never again. No, and people were puking, and I was like, no, trying to avoid it and getting my hair, and I'm like, no, I'm never doing this again. Just put me on the bat or something, okay?
Well, I mean, that's or astronauts returning from space after they do like their 6 months in the International Space Station, and they just drop things because to them it should float. They've already adapted to this new environment, and now they're back. So they feel very heavy. They feel like they weigh 100 extra pounds all of a sudden. Their neck and back hurts a lot from trying to hold their head up all the time. It's sort of the same thing. So I think they could probably relate to being newborns better than most people, because they've come from this sort of like gravity-free environment into gravity. And they do, I mean, I've seen them do it, like they let go of something and it falls, and they seem very surprised that it's fallen because it wouldn't have done that before. And that's kind of like where babies are coming from. when they're first born, they have to kind of adapt to their new living situation, and then they start to develop, those motor skills inside of this new environment, whereas they could do them before in utero just fine, but now they have to learn how to do them outside. And so I think that because there's that period of time where they don't really know how things function, they don't know how to work their body anymore, and they have to kind of figure all of this out again, we view them as not really being aware, or not really having a concept of the world outside of, trying to pick up their arm, But babies are sentient. They are very aware. They play, they laugh, they talk, they dance, they jump, they do all of this stuff.
So they're not only sentient if they're wanted and convenient at the time?
Yes.
Wow. Oh my God.
But this attitude that they don't exist as people, it's if you've ever had a child, you already know that this is idiocy. It's stupid. And the fact that science has caught up and society is going, no, that's not how it is. Society doesn't dictate science. Science is observation. Science is dictated by nature, by observing nature. It doesn't, I won't say that there aren't political biases in science. I think we've seen that very well.
Hell yes. Hell yes. DSM-5. All I need to say DSM-5. Yes. Okay.
See, I have 4 and I'm sticking with it.
Do you nurse your children, or do you use formulas and stuff? And I only say that because there's a lot of this is just going what after the baby's born. There's lots of important steps that people have discussed with regards to raising your children. One of the biggest ones is obviously spending time with them, physical contact with them as often as possible, and breastfeeding.
Oh, I breastfeed and baby carry.
Okay.
Woohoo!
All right.
Sorry, I'm totally happy right now. I did lactation consulting, but I try not to put it in people's faces and be like, "You need to boob feed, you're a bad mom."
Well, see, I don't do it out of any kind of emotional thing, because I have to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't like it's 115 degrees right now.
Oh, it's horrible, and it's like ice
holding
picks in
the
your
baby
chest,
all the
and
time
people have no idea.
Yes, like that. It's very, very hot. It's very uncomfortable, but that's ultimately better for them, so I do it anyway. Because one, it's not like it's a huge long time. Once they're babies, once they're mobile, they really don't have time for you. Unless they're hungry or wet, they're going to be doing their own thing, exploring, crawling around under tables and chairs, and it's a really small amount of time that you would even be carrying your baby anyway, so just suck it up.
Yeah,
that's pretty much where I'm at with it.
Oh God. I'm trying to stay here. Okay.
No, there's about it. I think if a father wants to have a child and the woman doesn't, fuck her, okay? Because this is a child and a responsible parent, and you know what? You can just deal with it. It's not like it's forever. Suck it the fuck up. And if you don't want to have kids, oh my God, get your fucking tubes tied, skank. Jesus. It's not this. Why make it so difficult? If you don't want to have a child and the father of the baby does, give him the child.
Yeah.
Done. Why is this such a difficult thing? Oh, because it's my child and I'm carrying this child and I shouldn't be forced into motherhood. Nobody's forcing you, bitch. I'm sorry. Were you not involved in the sex? Natural consequences are a thing. Deal with it. I'm sorry, but just deal with it.
It's parthenogenesis and the stork. It's Cabbage Patch Kids, and it just, you wake up and,
They grew on, they were these seeds, and you planted the seed, and then, a little, watermelon plant came out, and then you picked the watermelon, and then when you cut a peel it like an orange, and there's a baby inside. I thought that was how.
When I was a kid, there was seriously an urban legend that if you ate watermelon seeds, you could end up pregnant.
I totally believed it.
Yes. Oh, welcome to my childhood. Yeah.
Eating seeds does not make you pregnant.
No. In fact, if you extend the metaphor, it's a good way to avoid getting pregnant.
That's
half
right.
and half, yo.
You hear me? You hear what I'm getting at. Eat the seed. Don't get pregnant.
No, I'm right there with you.
Oh God. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna get in so much trouble with you guys, I swear.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I brought up the breastfeeding thing because, you know, there is real evidence that shows that if you breastfeed your children, they will increase their IQ. You seem like a, you know, I like the stuff that you talk about on your YouTube channel. You seem like a smart person. I'm glad you're breeding because, you know, no, there's a lot of stupid people making babies.
I'm actually a genius. Thank you.
You are? Or are you
Yes.
just saying that?
I'm actually a genius.
All right.
But I don't like IQ tests because it only tests what's on the test. And that I don't like it because I don't like it for the same reason I don't like standardized testing. Because if you have a natural talent or ability that's not covered on the test, you could come out thinking that you're very, very stupid when in fact you're very, very smart. And I don't like that. Or you can be, depending on the way that the test is proctored, you could be very, very stupid, but your response time is fast enough, so you seem like you're really, really smart. I don't like the way they're done. I just don't like it. I could go on for days. Like, this is one of those things of psychology that just, it drove me bananas. Because it's just whatever's on the test, and that doesn't really mean anything.
It seems that you don't normally. I saw one of your videos when you said that in real life you're not normally this chatty. Is that like, how true is that? Like, how different are you offline? And this also applies to Bunny Blackwell. Are you a different person when you're on these hangouts than in IRL? Because I find that a lot of people who I've met through Honey Badger Radio, when I meet them in real life, they're way more introverted. But this is stuff that's burning in their heads that they really want to get out, but they don't have a lot of opportunities to actually say it. So do you find that, do you relate to what I'm getting at?
Go ahead, Bas. You go first.
I was going to say probably, maybe, yeah. It's not really that I'm introverted, it's just I bite my tongue a lot. Because if I say it to your face, it's going to be a lot meaner than what I would say behind your back.
Right.
Like a lot meaner. So I just don't talk a lot.
Bunny?
I just don't.
Okay. I'm a pretty hard introvert, INTJ, shout out. But when I seek out interaction, I control my interaction, because I have kind of a limited cup for it. I have an extroversion cup, and when the cup runneth over, I have to go read a book or watch Netflix or something, and just be quiet. But when I am engaged, when I choose to engage, and I tend to do this by specific people. When I choose to interact with people, it's because there is something about them that is appealing or special or unique, and I tend to trust them as well to a certain degree. But I'm exactly the same. I am talking to you two like you were in my living room and we were like sharing vodka shots. This is exactly what it would be like. You know, we have a pizza on the table and we're hanging. And the answer is I don't do this with everyone. But when I choose to speak and when I choose to hang out, I am exactly the same. Like, exactly. Right down to the snorting when I laugh. So.
I agree. Okay. Yeah. I actually.
That just endears you to me even more.
I'm a bit of an oddball because I'm actually an ENTJ, but I'm very selective about when I want to be extroverted, I guess. And it's not because of anxiety. I used to have it really, really bad. Like, I was terrified to speak to people, even if I absolutely had to. And I had to sort of deprogram that. And now, last time I took one of those personality tests, I came out at ENTJ. So,
for me, it's less anxiety and more I just don't care what you have to say, so I have better things to do. Like, it really is kind of cunty that way. There are so few people. There are so few people I'm actually interested in what comes out of their mouth.
Yeah. And, so you're more like a filtering of how you're going to spend
noise. Yeah, it's a filtering of noise.
You're prioritizing your time.
Absolutely.
And that includes time listening to people.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So Bas Mama, as a mother, we just got into a big long thing about your soon-to-be next sort of born child. But for the ones that are out in the world that you're interacting with, what kind of stuff did you find in Tom Golden's talk from yesterday's show that you want to discuss? You said that you were listening and you took some notes and stuff, and there was things that were kind of interesting to you.
Well, I think you had a question for him, which was what is the disparities between single mothers and single fathers as far as like adult behavior in children. One of the things that with single fathers, you have less sexual activity in female children. With males, it is kind of roughly the same. It's actually a little bit less. I just read a paper on it. I don't know where I put it. I'm sorry. But it was men and women, they think differently, which they should. Their genetics are completely different. Women tend to be geared toward immediate need, and men tend towards a broad spectrum. Sorry, I'm fumbling on words. They tend to see the bigger picture and to plan accordingly with goals further out. So they have a greater capacity for delayed gratification in achieving goals, whether that's personal goals, familial goals, whatever. Women, because we're geared more toward the immediate need, that's difficult for us to do. It's not impossible, but it's difficult for us to do that, to have that long-term view. And I mean, men and women do need each other. We balance each other in these ways because we do think differently and we take different approaches. But when you're dealing with kids, when you have a father who's dominant in the home, you have kids who they understand the concept of working toward a goal and delaying gratification in favor of the ultimate goal. Whereas with children who are raised by single mothers, they tend to lack that thinking and that understanding of having something in the future as opposed to getting it as quickly and expeditiously as possible now. They understand the process of working towards that, and they understand better the concepts of sacrifice, of honor, of stoicism, and these are things that aren't common in women just because of our different ways of thinking. It's not, I don't know how to play it. I would think that saying that 10 to 20% have inverted brains is way overestimating, wildly. According to every study and going all the way
So as a refresher, in Tom Golden's book, he says about 17% of boys in utero, when the testosterone flood is supposed to hit, they end up with a more female brain. All right, so using the term female brain somewhat loosely in the same way that we would use the term male brain somewhat loosely because there is a lot of overlap, but there are definite differences between the two. And the same number of, the same percentage of girls, according to Tom Golden's book, experience the same thing, and that's how you get what we call tomboys, which are girls that tend to do more boyish activities and have more of an interest in the kinds of things that boys do. They like to play in groups. They like to do team sports. They like to climb trees. They're more. They take more risks, whatever it is. And you're saying, yeah, and what you're saying is that 17% number is, it seems too big, too exploded, too
it seems very, very, very high. I would say half of that.
Yeah.
But it's also not taking into account the neuroplasticity of the brain, particularly in children. So if you have, let's take the single mother concept. If she has a son and no father in the home, her dad maybe isn't involved, there's no male figure. She's relating to this child in a totally female way. His brain will adapt to that. So when you're looking at his brain, when he's 5 or 6 or 7 years old, it will have conformed to his mother's way of thinking in order for them just to be able to communicate and live with each other. So that's something else that this is something you would have to look at in newborns. And you couldn't go any further than that. 3 to 6 months is as far as you want to go, because after that their brain starts to change according to their caretakers. So if you don't have a balance there, they don't maintain any kind of a level. and their brains will change as they repeat more feminized behavior, or they modify their behavior and thinking patterns to adapt to the dominant influence in their life. Let's say a small boy and a single mom, as he's trying to adapt to her way of thinking and relating to her, his brain will change. It will try to adapt and make itself form into a way where he can communicate and deal with this caretaker, this dominant influence, in a more effectual way. Neuroplasticity is something that we didn't really understand until the Iraq War, really, when we were seeing a lot of brain damage and other parts of the brain, filling in the gaps and performing other functions. That's when we really started to see how powerful a concept that is. And that can happen for any number of reasons. So you might have a boy who would normally be a rough and tumble kid, who would normally run around, play, climb trees, whatever, and these activities are not sanctioned by his mother. Let's say reading quietly or something like that is. So the play section of his brain will start to die. Mm-hmm. The imagination will start to die. And the more, I want to say, like, literary section of his brain will grow. The emotional side of his brain will become dominant and start to take over the active side of his brain, so that he relates these non-active activities into the part of his brain that would normally function with active activities. And now they don't.
If so I may offer no, sorry, go on. Oh, I was just going to say,
have a little bit of lag.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay. If I may offer a bit of a counterpoint, mm-hmm. I don't think you're wrong. I just want to offer another point of view. Mm-hmm. Neuroplasticity is one of the things that I study. Mm-hmm. And from a personal perspective, I am one of those, and I'm not going to quote statistics of numbers. I haven't investigated enough, and I don't want to talk out of my butt. But I am one of those high T girls. Mm-hmm. So I have all the signs. I am incredibly strong. I develop muscle mass very quickly. My testosterone levels are high enough that they interfere with girly things, and so I'm one of those. And growing up, just as a counterpoint to neuroplasticity and how it may not extend, I was strongly encouraged to be girly. Strongly encouraged. It didn't matter. I was in my dad's tools. It did not matter. I had all the ponies, and the ponies waged war. Like I had every My Little fucking Pony ever, and I was playing Risk with them, and it did not matter. Yeah.
Although it kind of comes down to loci of control, just your personal disposition as to whether or not you will allow external influence to define you, or whether you will internally define yourself. And when it comes to this kind of stuff, there's so many factors that come in. You can't just chalk it up to one thing. And
no, of course. But I think there is a limit to neuroplasticity.
Yes.
I think there is a limit to neuroplasticity.
Well, I think that's why boys don't stick with it. I think that's why they break out and maybe turn, look at the statistic. They break out and begin to view masculinity as this double-edged sword of something they want to obtain, but then also just view it as it's seen as something bad, and so they kind of pursue the worst parts of it, if you know what I mean, like the bad habits, I guess, of it. And I think that's it. Of course it has its limits, but as all things do, even a loci of control, even if you have a 100% internal loci of control, you can still be influenced by people outside of you. You'll still sacrifice for your family and things like that. But I think that it can only hold for so long, because once you hit puberty and your prefrontal cortex begins to develop at such a rapid pace, you will start to sort this information and try to file it and make sense of it and define yourself, because you're moving into adulthood. So one of the things that I noticed when a lot of people talk about Black Lives Matter as like a slam against it, but you have about the same percentage with poor white single mothers as far as criminality goes as you do with poor Black single mothers.
Absolutely.
So it's not, I mean, they want to make it a racial issue. It isn't a racial issue. It's very much environmental, because you still have your, odd ducks. You still have your kids raised by single moms who are very successful.
Absolutely.
But it's, I think when you have such a intense influence, I think it really depends on the perspective of the dominant caretaker, as far as what your attitudes are when you're a kid. Because one of the things I also noticed, because I did grow up in the South, but we're very integrated. There was everybody from everywhere. It was also a college town, so there wasn't really like dominant white people there, if that makes sense. Everybody was kind of jumbled up together. But when everybody's all jumbled up together, you start to see how much of an influence environmental factors have, as opposed to just being born, maybe Indian or Russian or whatever. You start to kind of see that really doesn't, it has something to do with it, because you're going to have a prevailing culture and a mindset, but the environment that you grow up in has, like your home environment, has so much more to do with it than you ever thought. Like I don't know, we kind of went too much the other way. Like before, we were taught that it was all about genetics, and I mean, you study psychology, so you're familiar with the 4 temperaments, and how that's still a basis for a lot of stuff. And you're like,
oh my God,
I do not know why.
No,
but it is.
No, it's the least favorite aspect of what I do, I'll be honest. I am not a fan of psych. I much prefer quantitative things like chemistry. Chemistry is my home. So whenever we start getting into,
this is like what my mom does, and I'm like, it's not really a science, and she hates that. We'll get into rows. Well, but it isn't, because you're talking about something. Your personal brain develops over time. It's, yes, you're going to start with a certain amount of basis that's going to be related to your genetics, and that will interact with the world around you, and it will change and modulate that information and file it and structure it according to the stimulation and your reaction to the stimulation, which is very individualistic. So you can't really quantify things in psychology because everybody's different.
No, it's all lived experience. And I'm like, but what if you're crazy? And then your lived experience is just crazy. Oh, I can't do it.
Then you get into
beautiful
so mind territory. But yes, I understand.
Yeah, I can't even do it. I try so hard. But I entertain it, right? I have an open mind, and I try very hard, and I read it, and I'm like, okay, I could kind of, if I squint and put my head sideways like a little puppy dog, I can kind of see where that's coming from, maybe.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I'm like, la, 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 no. But I wanted to say, one of the things, oh, sorry?
No, go ahead. I have lag, so it stops and I hear you, and I'm like, I'm sorry.
No.
Go ahead, Bunny, go ahead.
Thank you. One of the things I like about what you're saying, Bas Mama, is, in my experience, exposing your children to many different people, assuming it's safe and you vetted them and all that, 9 yards, but is one of the best things you can do, because they learn from other people and they go, well, I don't know if I really like that person. You have to let your kids dislike people. And I don't think there's enough of that right now. People are a kid.
But vetting people is racist. It's gross. It's racist.
Oh yeah, I forgot. It's racist.
Yeah. Oh no. But that person smells funny. I don't like them. Okay. But as a parent, you can then go, okay, why? Okay, why do you think that is? You learn more from your kids by asking them questions than you do by telling them things, And kids are smart, and I think the number one mistake we are doing right now, right from pre-K all the way to me here in university, is we're treating kids like they're fucking idiots, and then them becoming fucking idiots.
Well, if you come to educating children, either in the home or at school or whatever, from the perspective of they need to parrot what I have said. You're already screwing them up.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not learning anything. Especially, like, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, the way that boys and girls learn. And I'm a high T girl too. So I learn by doing something. I can't theory anything. This is useless information to me. I mean, like, I'll get it and I can spit it back to you and whatever. But if I'm not performing the task, it doesn't stay with me.
No, I want to do it. I want to blow shit up. Let's do it. Down. Oh, yeah. No, I'm right there.
But we have, our education system is very much geared toward rote memorization.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, like we were talking about before, at the introduction of Common Core, where they're teaching to the test. So you're not getting an education, you're learning how to take this test here. Which teaches you nothing and makes you an idiot.
See, I agree with rote in some things. I think kids should rote multiplication tables so they can do more complex equations quickly. But Common Core, it's all sticks and fucking dots and like, what?
Yes, my son's second grade homework, he failed a test, and the question he failed on was, there is one bridge that is 30 meters long. There is another bridge that is 15 meters long. That's it. There's no, this is the information we want to know. That's the question. So I'm staring at it, and I have, like, okay, what do you want to know? And they're basically supposed to figure out what you want to know. And I'm like, whoever made this up has never taught a child in their entire life. Mm-hmm. Never even spoken to one, I would bet you money. Because this would make no sense to a kid, especially a boy.
What are you
he needs
asking?
A goal.
What goal?
Even the girls are like, what do you want to know? Like, I don't understand this. And it's I use Singapore math for homeschool. It's very goal-oriented. There's a lot of manipulatives and tactile things you touch and deal with, and it's functional math. You understand what you're doing there. So to go from that in pre-K to suddenly you have these kind of open-ended, not really questions, it's very
What are you even asking?
Well, like even regular pre-K stuff, 1 + 1 is 2, and now it's like, I have 1 and you have 1. And that's the end of the question. Like, okay.
Yes, it's so feely. It's all feely. No, I am so sorry. I am about to turn into a pumpkin. My 2 hours is just about up.
Yeah, we got to wrap up. Unfortunately, but you know what though? This was a very good discussion. We'd like to bring. Maybe we'll get you back on, Mama, if you'd like. I'd like to talk to you about things that are of interest to me. I want to talk about Islam. I want to talk about Black Lives Matter. I want to talk about feminism, and also maybe more about parenting boys and girls too. Not to dismiss, but since we.
My advice on parenting boys, it's very simple. Let them do what they do.
Morale.
Don't overparent them until they're hurt. And then they will come to you. Boys will come to you when they have a problem.
Yeah.
Yep.
You don't need to hover.
And you don't need to beat them when they screw something up. One thing I've noticed just quickly before we go, between boy and girl children, when boys screw up, it's like their universe has ended and they have let everyone down. And I have watched this happen, and depression rates in boys are so much higher, and of course suicide rates are higher, and I think that's part of it, because when there's a failure, even if it's a small failure, it's just the end of the fucking world to them, and you can't mock that because it is quite real in that moment. You have to go, no, you're not a failure. It's okay. Keep trying.
Yeah,
and that is a skill I think that has been, try again. Master Wayne, why do we fall? But people aren't saying that. I had to get a Batman reference in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But that's not being said anymore. It's, well, you just screwed up. So what are you going to do now? Are you a screw up because you're a man? Are you a screw up because you're a boy? How could you do that? And I don't think we're giving boys the kind of support they need, which is not to commiserate and say, oh, poor baby. It's to say, it's not a big deal. Get up. You're okay. You didn't let everyone down.
It's like that video with the martial arts instructor, and he's got the board, and he's got all these boys there, and one of the boys is trying to punch through with his left hand, and he's starting to cry because it's hurting his left hand because it's not his good hand. And the instructor gets down on one knee and he says, "It's okay to cry. Why are you crying?" You know, and after a while, the boy confesses that it's hard because it's my left hand, and the instructor says, the pain, the reason why you're not pushing through this is because the pain is making you recoil. And he gives him constructive criticism on how to push through that. And he also supports him, listens to him, and explains that these are life's obstacles.
Yes, and you have to have that.
Yeah. And then he gets through that, and the boy is great, and after he's and this is all, this is the environment that this was all happening in. It was like a male teacher, and his father, the boy's father, was off to the side watching, and all these boys are there. And he learned a valuable lesson. It's a great video if you can find it.
I'll look for it, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I am so distressed by the male suicide rates. It actually genuinely haunts me a little bit, and I'm not prone to touchy-feelies, but it really bothers me. And so I'm trying to sort of murder board the entire picture of why it's happening. And I think a lot of it is that there's no morale anymore. There's no mentorship. There's no teaching boys how to be men in a positive way, not shaming, but not treating them like girls either. Striking that balance that perhaps only those with twig and berries truly understand. And I would not pretend to myself.
Well, many men are still trying to also understand that. They don't know it. They have been. There's a lot of unknowns in many men today about what it means to be masculine, and it's because they're getting a lot of really negative messages.
Mixed messages too.
Yes, from their media and their instructors. I mean, if you want to, if you're a man and you turn on your TV or you go on the internet to look at the news or you go to school, specifically high school and college, you will learn how awful you are, and nothing else. And it is only due to the fact that you were born that way. This is a constant barrage, and it's no wonder that people don't even want to understand men. It's actually very surprising that a book like Tom Golden's, whether there's stuff in there that needs to be challenged or not, it's very telling that is something that is so hard to find these days. And I think that the fact that we're discussing this is, I think it's not only good for men, but it's good for everybody. This is something that is absolutely imperative. And, there's stuff that I learned about men after joining up with, and helping Allison out with Honey Badger Radio that I had never known before. And it's only because I entered, this place that's outside of the mainstream, and I'm really grateful for that. I think that that's great, and of course there are individuals that do have a grasp on it, but I think there's a lot of misinformation floating around. I think there's a lot of people that don't understand it, or they're capitalizing on this ignorance. And I mean, like Steven Crowder just made a video, and there's a section where he talks about manhood in there, and it's actually really great. It's in the middle of like some 2.5 hour long podcast, but it's also really great that he says, there's this weird binary thing where you're either this weak beta male that's afraid of masculinity or resents it and hates it and wants to see it torn down, or you're like this big alpha, weightlifting douchebag that's trying to like figure out if you got the veins in your biceps right. And he's like, that's not reality. Neither of those things are real things. And the greatest men in history, the people that we have the most respect for, the people that we admire the most, they did not specifically have those traits about which we admired. We liked them because of the things they did, the way that they dealt with problems, the way that they put other people before themselves, the way in which they reasoned the world around them and discussed, what their findings were. And mainly it was stuff like their integrity, their ability to take responsibility, their sense of honor, and their individuality and their independence, which they didn't just want for themselves, but they wanted for others. And
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
When you said integrity and honor, I think that's something that we're very devoid of right now.
And we
absolutely.
And
gotta
it's
stop.
something
We gotta.
that's it's innate in men, though. I mean, you have to unteach that in boys. You have to make them unlearn that because they have an instinct to protect female. It's an instinct, and you literally have to beat it out of them.
Hmm.
And
We need to.
why? Why would you do that? You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
it's no. I'm right on board with both everything both of you are saying. We have to stop setting men and boys up to fail because that's what I see happening right now. That there is literally nothing men and boys can do that is right, and what a crushing weight that is.
Yeah.
And that's why I've started calling it out. And I think it's probably why you do what you do, Brian. It's probably why what you parent the way you do, Based Mama. So I think we're all kind of on the same page here.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, especially maybe, I've really noticed it probably in the past 20 years. There's just far too much female interference in the male sphere. There's no, like, they always want safe spaces, but they're not
There's
willing
no
to
boy
extend
spaces.
that to men.
Yes.
Yes, and men are natural teachers, and they will teach boys how they do manhood. That's not necessary. They don't have the expectation that that boy will then like adapt that, and that will be the way he does it. But it's more of an approach like this is the way I do it, and there's more encouragement to extend your view, I think, among men than there is among women, who tend to take a very narrow view of masculinity and manhood, and because we're on the outside, you
Hmm.
know what I mean? So we're just sort of casual observers of manhood. We don't live it. We don't understand what it means to be a man. We don't understand what men go through as boys and then growing up into men. We don't understand what their needs are because we ourselves are not men. We have not faced these challenges. We don't have these innate instincts that are the same as men. We have different instincts, and they are compatible. They do work well together. But it seems to me that it really is the feminization of boys.
Mhm.
I hate, like, I don't want my kids to not be with their dad, especially my boys.
Hmm.
Um, but they also have their stepdad and their grandfathers, and there's more than one male influence there, and it's not just for the boys, but it's for all of them to broaden their perspectives. I
Yeah.
don't, I think that we're trying so hard to, I wouldn't even say it's misguided. We're trying to force boys to be people we can understand, and
And
they
Yeah.
don't
that's
have that
yeah.
experience.
Yeah, and we're not trying to understand them instead. We're
No. And
trying to
before
make them into the people we want them to be instead of trying to just observe what's there and get a grasp of what it is. And
we're trying.
also see these people as individuals instead of just, a group that we can just lump in the most negative, extreme cases and say that's masculinity, like Elliot
Well,
Rodger or something.
from a
We're trying
parenting
to make them.
perspective, if you're approaching your kids, male or female, as anything other than whole individuals, you're already doing it wrong
Hmm.
because they're different people. Same parents, same environment, doesn't matter. They're going to respond to that environment differently.
Yeah.
So they're their own person from the jump. I think that's why I was kind of going on about the in utero thing. You can get to know your child's personality before you ever lay eyes on them, because they're going to have their own temperament, they're going to have their own interests, they're going to respond to different things, they're going to like different things, dislike other things, and these things are well developed, and they'll continue to develop them. But to approach your children as though they're blank slates is an instant mistake. You're already approaching it from the wrong perspective, and you're already going to screw them up because you're seeing them as nothing and no one from the beginning, but they already are someone. They're already their own person. So I think that if you're approaching parenting like this person has no real existence or personality other than what I put on them, you're already messing it up.
Hmm.
They are who they are, and you have to respect them as an individual, as a person, and work from there. There are some things that will apply to, broad spectrum, and that's fine. But when it comes to their needs and their personality and relating to them parent to child, because you cannot treat two children the same way. You can't do it. You can have rules that apply to everybody, and that's different. That's like a structural hierarchy type thing. This is the way things run in this environment. But when you approach your child, especially from an emotional level, in order to connect and bond with them, you can't do it that way. They are already their own person. Mm-hmm. You have to bond with them in a way that you can both kind of give and take in that relationship on their level and on yours, and find a way to bond together. I don't know where this blank slate thing came from. I'm sure it has some horrible start in some stupid academic paper that is awful and has been shredded upon peer review. But because it just can't stand up to practical use.
Yeah, I think that blank slate crap comes from the same place that the whole, gender is a social construct, something that we socialize into our kids from day one and nothing more. And there's nothing more to it. I think it comes from that same school of thought, because you need that. You need that whole, you need those two things to exist. Otherwise, if you ignore the blank slate part, then the gender as a social construct part doesn't work. So you need both of those things. And I think that that's essentially let's say, a biblical approach to academic pursuits, where you say, well, here's the conclusion. We need this conclusion. Now, how do we get the facts that support our conclusion?
Mm-hmm.
That was confirmation bias. Confirmation, yeah.
And before I bounce, this is the one last thing I wanted to say. Getting back to everything that has happened in the last 5 minutes, I think we have to make a distinction between, are we trying to understand men, or are we trying to make men understandable? Yeah. And there is a huge distinction, and I think people make the mistake of conflating it by assuming, well, I'm going to make them fit in my context, so clearly I know exactly what's going on with them. And instead of shutting the fuck up, listening, and going, this is not my lived experience, but I'm going to listen, and maybe, just maybe, I'm going to extend a bit of credit that they're telling the truth about what it's like. And there isn't a lot of that happening, but I try to do it more successfully than others sometimes. But when I started off on this whole, what's an MRA? What did they do? That was one thing I promised myself I would always try to do, is just listen and file it away and absorb and be really slow to put my own confirmation bias on it. Anyway, I gotta go. Thank you so much, Bas Mama. Thank you so much, Brian, for having me.
Sure. I gotta go too anyways.
Yeah. And thank you, everybody in the audience, for listening.
Yeah, bye. And I want to thank Bas Mama. If you want to come back, we'll talk about more stuff, and we'll figure out a time. Maybe have like a longer stream, or I can come on one of yours. I know that you have streams too, so.
I do sometimes, intermittently.
Yeah. So yeah, just let us know, and I can probably get a few folks to come with me. I have some strings that I can pull. So
are you Puppet Master Doge? Puppet Master Doge. That's awesome.
So I am the secret ending from Silent Hill.
Spoilers!
Reference. Oh yeah, I know. If you don't know by now, then you're never gonna.
If you don't know me by now, then you're never gonna know me.
Oh, okay.
On that
note. All right, I'm gonna close it out.
Yeah, on that note.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Bunny, and thank you, Bas Mama.